Hi, I'm Colin.
And I'm Phil.
We're the hosts of Science Fiction 101.
It's a show which gets to the heart of science fiction. Books, films, TV. We've covered Star Trek,
Doctor Who,
Star Wars.
We love to explore the past, present, and future of science fiction.
And we'd love for you to join us
on Science Fiction 101.
Hi, Colin.
Hi, Phil.
We're recording this in November 2024, and we've had a time slip. Colin, did you know? Here in the UK, we put the clocks back last weekend, but I don't think you've done it yet, have you?
No, it's next weekend for us.
Wow, so we're adrift, and I always get that little anxiety of, which way are we adrift? Anyway, for today's main topic, we have 10 or so questions about books. Not specific books, but books in general. So we'll talk about that in a while. But first, some follow-up from listeners. Last time we talked about the Planet of the Apes TV series, and Linda divulged I had a big crush on Roddy McDowall's character. So thank you, Linda. And Sue referred to our episode as an amusement park of an episode. She said, I had no idea there was a TV series of Planet of the Apes and enjoyed learning about it. She liked hearing about Ricardo Montalban and so on. And she said, finally, I blame you, and I think she's pointing at me when she says this, for getting me started on yet another podcast. Every single sci-fi film ever, asterisk. It just started this March, so there are only about 18 episodes to catch up on, but I'm thrilled to hear that Phil will be on an upcoming episode. 3 cheers for academics. Yay! So thank you, Sue. I did indeed appear on an episode. I'll tell you about that later. And Joe said, you seemed to wonder why the show, Planet of the Apes, was aimed at kids. Merchandise. I think Planet of the Apes was successful at selling toys, lunchboxes, etc. I had a few as a kid. And yeah, I've heard people say that. And of course, this was pre-Star Wars. Star Wars was the really big thing for merchandising. But there was quite a bit of apes merchandise around. But I've always been very sceptical. Can you really cover the budget of a TV series by selling a few lunchboxes? I find that hard to believe. And then finally, Kelly said, I discovered recently that as much as I love the Apes movies, this series is a bit of a grind. Weirdly, I found the exact opposite about the Logan's Run series, which, while not great, was much more interesting than I'd remembered. So, it's all a matter of taste. I found the Apes series, I used to love it as a kid, and I still love it when I watch it now. There's a couple of real turkey episodes, but no, mostly it's fine. So, books.
Book question 1. Do you buy hardcovers? And if so, why?
So,
Colin Kusky from Oregon.
Yes.
Do you buy hardcovers?
Yeah, these days... there's one of these questions coming up, and I don't want to spoil the answer to it. Half of the books that I buy these days are all hardcovers. And I do that to support the authors that I really, really like reading. And they last longer. I have bought all kinds of books in my life. And my hardback books last the longest of any of them that I have. I love the way they feel in the hand. Mm-hmm. They smell great. And I have to confess, there's another reason. And this one people might think are silly. But if you've ever read the book Lucifer's Hammer.
I haven't. Okay.
It's a Niven and Pornell book.
Yeah.
It's about an asteroid impacting with the Earth, and there's a scientist who becomes worried about what will happen with, an apocalyptic event like that. So he ends up sealing books into double-stuffed plastic bags with mothballs to preserve them.
Wow.
And those books end up influencing the plot much later in the book. And for a while I thought, I should do that. I should have books that I can preserve. And
So you're doing it for the future of humanity?
I am.
I don't really have a kind of a policy for hardcovers, but I think just from a practical point of view, most of my life I've only bought hardcovers if there's nothing else available. given a choice, if there is a hardcover and next to it is an identical book, which is a soft cover binding of the very same book, I'd go for the soft cover, partly because they're cheaper, but also because they tend to take up a little less space and be a little less heavy. So I'm not too fetishistic about hardcovers. But having said that, I've got quite a few hardcovers because some books you can only get as hardcovers. I mean, I don't go chasing after limited editions, but if a book comes out which is a limited edition and I want it or need it and it's a hardcover, I'm going to get it. So yeah, I don't lust after hardcovers, but I do buy them from time to time. But you're right, they do last longer, and I've got some hardcovers here from about 1980, which are in good condition, and next to them I've got some paperbacks of the same era, and the paperbacks have gone all brown. The bindings are still good because I treat my bindings with respect, but the paper doesn't last as long in a paperback.
No.
Book question 2. Do you buy paperbacks? And if so, why?
Well, when I was younger and had less money around, paperbacks were definitely the way to buy books.
Yeah.
And they store much more densely than my hardcovers.
Yes. As I was thinking about this, I was reminded that I discovered mail order. This was years before the internet. As a young reader who found that books in shops were not very interesting because there weren't very many books and there weren't very many shops where I lived. In my hands right now, I've got a 1980 paperback. And I don't know if you had this where you are, but the very last page says, "The world's greatest science fiction authors now available in Panther Books." And then there's a list of titles by Ray Bradbury. Then there's 4 books by Keith Roberts, 2 by Philip K. Dick. And then it says, all these books are available at your local bookshop or newsagent. Well, no, they're not. Or can be ordered direct from the publisher. Just tick the titles you want and fill in the form below. And I don't know what sort of age I filled one of these in for the first time. But I distinctly remember tearing out one of these pages, ticking a couple of books, sending off my remittance, and then a couple of weeks later, these books would arrive. But the company that did this, there was one company in Cornwall, which is the southwest corner of England, that used to do this fulfilment for all the major publishers. And they would send you the books you'd ordered, but they'd also put in the catalogues of the publishers. So I got the Penguin catalogue, I got the Granada catalogue, I can't remember who else was publishing back then, but they would give you the full list of everything that Penguin had in print, for instance, and that was fascinating to me. And so I would sort of order half the catalogue, and all by mail order, simply because I didn't have access to decent bookshops. And so I became this paperback fiend, and still most of my books are paperbacks. So I kind of love the form, but they go brown over time. Sometimes the bindings fall apart.
We had a bookstore in town that had a pretty good selection. But again, in the back of almost every paperback book that I bought there was an advertisement for getting more books from this author or exploring other authors from the same publisher. And I've mentioned this on the podcast in the past. I keep wondering what would happen if I took one of those today. Are they obligated to sell those things at that price?
Of course, yes, because let me just look at this one again. Yes, this has got the prices of the books.
Because you have to know how much to send them by check.
Of course you do, yes. Oh, there's some small print. This one says, Granada Publishing reserve the right to show new retail prices on covers, which may differ from those previously advertised in the text or elsewhere. So I think they've got themselves a little get-out clause there.
Book question 3. Do you buy ebooks? And if so, why?
I do. It's a cost thing because a lot of times you can get them for $2 or $3.
Mm-hmm.
And they store so much more densely than any other book format that I have bought.
Yeah.
And recently, you'd mentioned needing readers for some of your paperback books. My ebooks, you can adjust the font on any ebook and make it readable.
Yeah.
And that's a very nice thing.
I maintain 2 devices. I have a Kindle, which is mostly my fiction books, because usually there are no illustrations, so changing the font size, all of that doesn't interfere with the enjoyability of the book. But a lot of my non-fiction ebooks are PDFs. A lot of them are illustrated, and they do display on a Kindle, but they don't display very well, and you can't change the print size without also scaling the images, so it's a bit messy on a Kindle. So I have a tablet which I keep all of my non-fiction books on, but I admit to having thousands of ebooks. To me, once a book has come into my gravitational influence, it's never going to leave. I'm a black hole.
Yeah, I think, especially for podcasting, for Take Me to Your Reader, where we're tending to read, old books that you can get off of Gutenberg, they do get loaded onto devices or laptops, and then, they never get deleted.
Yeah. So what's your e-reader of choice?
I've had a bunch. I started off reading everything on my phone. And it was great to be able to, in line at the store or while you're waiting in line at the gas station to, whip out a book and read for a little while.
Yeah.
And I miss those days, and I'm actually kind of moving back that way. But I've stayed pretty much in Barnes & Noble, and that's because I have a love-hate relationship with Amazon.
Yeah.
In the early 90s, Amazon patented the famous one-click Amazon patent.
Mm-hmm.
And the software world that I was part of, was like deeply offended by this idea that you would, patent software, and that the patent would even be awarded was ridiculous. So I don't do a lot of Amazon unless I absolutely have to. So almost all my books are from Barnes & Noble. I do buy books directly from authors. I have some from Diane Duane. I have a whole bunch from Brandon Sanderson.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be careful about going to the Humble Bundle site, because every once in a while they'll have something which grabs me, and I end up with Tad Williams' entire ebook collection. And so on my tablet I have Barnes & Noble apps. I sideload those. I end up not getting rid of a lot of electronics, and so I always have extra devices that I can loan to people, saying, hey, take this, my old phone, and read this book, because it's harder to loan ebooks than it is physical books.
Yeah.
That's one major downside.
There's both an upside and a downside. I mean, one of the thoughts is what happens to your books when you pass away. And with physical books, the bonus is that other people get to have your books. But the downside is the burden that you place on those you leave behind, the people who have to get rid of your books. With ebooks, it's the opposite. It's those books effectively vaporize when you die. Yes, somebody else can pick up your device and carry on accessing them, but officially, when you die, your ebooks do not pass on to anybody else, because all you own is a license.
It was a number of years ago, I think before the pandemic, where Amazon lost the license to a particular publisher, and everybody's books disappeared off their Kindles. And the outrage, because people didn't understand that about what they were paying for. Unless you physically buy a file from a third-party site and you own a copy of it separate from their website, which can also disappear, you really don't own it. And the other major problem is you cannot get an ebook autographed. So sometimes when an author comes through town, or if I know that I'm going to see an author, I'll buy a hardback and get an autograph when I can. I want to do that for Mary Robinette Cole next time I see her, which will probably be at the Worldcon next year.
Somebody must have turned up at an author signing with a Kindle and got the author to sign the Kindle. Surely somebody's done that, even if they've just done it as a joke.
Yeah, or maybe you get a little autographed book that you keep to the side or something.
The other thing to say about ebooks is to counteract books just evaporating, you want to be able to back them up. Because I'm a little bit paranoid about losing stuff. I always want to know that there is some kind of backup, not just Amazon's cloud or whoever's cloud. I want to know that there is some physical backup. So I do use Calibre to make backups of everything where I possibly can. But that means I've got a number of books where, to be honest, I don't know legally what the status of them is. I've got some books that I've acquired from other people, that other people have given me. I don't know whether they're legit or not. And frankly, I don't really care. If a book ends up on my Kindle, it's there and I'm going to own it as far as I'm concerned. I think what I'm trying to get around to saying is that there is no sense of provenance There might be something hidden in the code, but you don't really have any record of where you got a thing from.
Yeah. I've wondered about digital watermarking. For the longest time, when I first started buying ebooks, they were not great quality. There'd be these weird typos in them. And so I would try contacting, Barnes & Noble, or try contacting the publisher, and nothing would come of it. Now on my Kindle, which I do own a few Kindle books, there's a way you can say, report a problem back to the author or publisher. That's built right into the reader, and I think that's a great feature.
Book question 4. Do you borrow books from libraries?
Heavily. I'm reading a book right now, a physical book. I have 3 ebooks on hold. Our library, you can also get audiobooks that way, and I've thought about getting one, but my audiobook consumption pace is so slow, the hold request on the electronic files would expire before I got all the way through the book.
Funnily enough, I was in a library today. I haven't been in public libraries very much since the pandemic, quite frankly. I kind of got out of the habit, other than university libraries. I've still visited those, but not public libraries. But I was in a public library today, and I was looking around at the books, and there were there were 2 that I picked up, and I thought, these are very interesting. I might check these out. But then when I thought about, I've got to carry these books now. So I didn't take the books away, but I know they're there, if I want them. And what I did do is make a note of those books, and I will see if I can get an ebook version without spending too much money on them. And that reminds me, another thing you don't get with ebooks is second-hand books. You sometimes do get these deep discounts, but there's no second-hand market because of this licensing thing.
So does your library have an electronic lending system for sending and retrieving ebooks and audiobooks and stuff?
Yes, it does. I must admit, I've never actually used it, but today I did. Actually, I updated the app on my phone because they're switching from one system to another. They've been using Overdrive, but now it's being replaced by Libby. So today I had downloaded Libby and just checked that it worked by just downloading a random book. Always, the first thing I wanted to know, where is that file? I know it's downloaded something because it works offline. Where has it put that file? And can I put it somewhere safe or somewhere where I know where it is? And I don't know. I mean, I can find out. Because that's the thing. The book you take from the library, you take care of it and you know where it is. But the ebook, it's just there. And in 4 weeks or 3 weeks when the loan period runs out, it will not be there. And I kind of want to know where it is. And when it's not there, because it's been returned to the system electronically, is it still taking up space on my device? Who knows? I don't know.
I never thought about that. Yeah, in Libby, you can have it deliver it to your Kindle.
Now, I read about this. You can, but I can't because it's not available in the UK.
What?
Yeah, that facility is not available in the UK.
I'm gobsmacked.
I know. So was I.
I mean, I was also gobsmacked when I learned the crazy licensing rules the libraries have to follow for participating in these libraries. They pay an exorbitant amount for each copy. And after every so many loans, they have to buy a new copy on top of that.
Right, yes.
So back to that idea, when you buy a book, you own it. And you read it for years or decades even until it starts to fall apart. And at my library, when books age out, either to being in poor repair or being unpopular, they have the library book sale.
Yeah.
Where you can go buy used media, used books. That money goes back to support the library. It goes to, fill up my bookshelves.
Yeah.
It was a long-standing joke that if we were going downtown near Powell's, I had to give my wife my credit card. And when my wife goes to the library book sale, because she loves to acquire used music and, then we rip it for our media library, same kind of a thing, because she'll come home with a stack of like 15 or 16 CDs. And I look at that and go, where in the world are we going to store that?
Book question 5. Do you borrow books from other people?
I think, when I was in college, I did. I had a friend, Mark Tarasawa, great trombone player, super fun guy. And he was also into science fiction, and we would swap some books back and forth. He's the one that introduced me to the Orson Scott Card books that were not part of the Ender's Game series. So the Alvin Maker, he introduced me to Spider Robinson, some great science fiction. These days, I work from home, and I have a pretty small life as far as things go, so I don't have a lot of people to swap books with. Seth and James and I have swapped all books already. I lend a lot of books to people. Because people will come and look at look at the shelf and say, "Oh, that's interesting." So we'll take one and bring it back when you're through.
But do they?
Sometimes.
Oh, good. Yeah, I generally don't borrow books from other people. I sort of have a policy of declining any loans of books, simply because on the few occasions where I have borrowed a book from somebody else, I've never got round to reading it. And so not only do you have in your possession a book that needs to go back to somebody else, you carry around the guilt for not having read it. And as I was sorting out some books a few weeks ago, I came across a paperback which I know somebody lent to me probably about 30 years ago. And I've still got it, and I still haven't read it, and I've forgotten who it was who lent it to me. So, no, don't lend me a book.
Book question 6. Which book have you owned the longest?
I have a 1981 copy of Alan Dean Foster's Splinter of the Mind's Eye.
This is the Star Wars sequel?
It is. Yeah, written in between Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back, before we learned that Luke and Leia were brother and sister. And so there's a little romance going on in there, which you read today and go, oh.
So what format is that in?
It's a paperback.
And is it still in good condition?
It's hanging in there. The pages are pretty brown, but the spine is in good shape.
The book I've owned the longest is an Arthur C. Clarke short story collection. And I think it was published in about 1972. The pages are in fairly good condition because it was quite decent paper. The spine is a little bit dying. And this is the thing with me and paperbacks, and it's partly because I don't loan them out to anybody. They're in good condition. I'd never break the spine of a paperback if I can help it. I have to say, I've got lots of American paperbacks of a similar vintage, and generally speaking, the British paperbacks have stood up better. The American ones, the pages have browned a lot more. And then the related question.
Book question 6b. What's the oldest book you own? And this may, or may not, be the same answer as the previous question.
What I'm thinking of here is you may have bought something yesterday, which was published in the 1880s. So that would be the oldest book you own, even though you've only owned it for a short time, if you see the difference there.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, is it the earliest published that I might have a newer copy of? Because I have a copy of The Hobbit. It was written in 1937. My copy was written nowhere near then.
No, that's not what I'm thinking of, because then you could say, I've got the Epic of Gilgamesh. But it's not the first edition on a cuneiform tablet. It's a paperback published last week. So it's physically the oldest book that you possess.
Well, I've talked in the past about how I have volunteered with Project Gutenberg doing digital editing of ebooks. And I had wanted to contribute a book. And that's a hard thing to do because you have to get one that's in the public domain. But I managed to get my hands on a 1926 edition of the German Chocolate Cookbook. Food manufacturers would make cookbooks for their food so that you would buy it and use it and consume it and buy things from them. They would tell you how to cook it. So I have a copy from 1926 of that cookbook, and my intention is to scan it and send it up to Gutenberg so that everyone can know how to make fine German chocolate recipes.
Oh, that's terrific. Has he got any pictures, or is it just recipes?
It's pictures.
That's amazing. I've just grabbed from a cupboard behind me the book that I think is the oldest book that I own, and it's from 1945. This is very obscure. Its very obscurity is the reason that I own it. It's a book called Nicholas Copernicus, A Tribute of Nations. And what it was, in, I think, 1943, Copernicus, the famous astronomer, the one who discovered that the Earth is not the centre of the universe. It was the quadricentennial of his death, so 500 years since he died. So I think there was a conference, and this book is a collection of papers from that conference. And the reason I bought this book is because I read somewhere that it contained a play about Copernicus, and I was writing a screenplay about Copernicus, and I thought, well, I've got to read this play. I've got to see how other people have presented the Copernicus story. It's quite interesting for those of us who are interested in Copernicus. The spine is structurally in good shape, but superficially is falling apart, so it's sort of in pieces. The cover of the book, it's a hardcover, of course, because it's from 1945, and it's got nothing to do with science fiction.
Oh, I tend to think that anything that is, science related, especially if it has to do with astronomy or related fields, is tangentially science fiction related.
Yeah, I would argue that as well. In terms of science fiction stuff, I've got a James Gunn first edition hardcover from about 1954.
Book question 7. Do you ever run out of book space? Have you ever needed to downsize?
I have.
What do you do when you run out of space?
Well, we went through and kind of pruned books. What did I read once and then not really want to keep? What things have I never read? And those books got packaged up and taken to Powell's, where they got turned into new books.
Ah, interesting.
Because they'll buy used books and give you cash. And walking out of Powell's with cash is almost not allowed.
You've got to reinvest, haven't you? So, I run out of book space occasionally, and my first manoeuvre usually is more shelves. So, but then you get to the point where every piece of spare space in your house is full of shelves and there's nowhere else to go. So every now and again I've tried to physically downsize, and I've been doing that the last year or two. I kind of figure that the only books I have that are of any value are the hardcovers. The paperbacks are more stuff that I bought in the 80s and have no particular value, and even if I were to try to sell them, I wouldn't get anything for them. So what I've tended to do over the last few years is obtain ebook versions of those books, and if I've got the ebook, I'll get rid of the paperback. I don't have the time or the interest to do that on a wholesale basis. So what I tend to do is I keep a box, and every now and again I'll do about 10 books, make sure I've got the ebook version, and then I'll sell those paperback books. But we've got things here, I don't know if you have these in the States, we have Music Magpie and Ziffit, where basically you scan the barcode on your books or your CDs, they will tell you if they'll buy it from you, you then stick them in a box and send them off, and they send you money. You don't get very much money, but it's a useful way of downsizing.
I've never heard of such things. I think that Powell's Powell's added an online version of their book buyers, and they only handle books. I don't think they do media.
I don't think I would ever throw away a book. I don't think I could bring myself to do that. I think if I've got something that I want to get rid of and I can't sell it, I think charity shops is the thing for me.
Book question 8. What about audiobooks? Is listening reading?
Well, okay. First of all, I love a full cast audiobook. I love a good audiobook with voice distinction between the characters read by a single author. And I own several of those as well. But the question about does it count as reading? So on my other podcast, Seth and I argue almost incessantly about adaptation. Seth's argument is that an audiobook is the same thing as the book. And my counter argument to that is that when you're hearing somebody speak, it has extra information in it. Different words have different weights. People talk at different rates. Your intonation can change. You emphasize things. You pronounce some words differently. And in science fiction and fantasy, that's a real thing because words get invented all the time. And so I feel like an audiobook is an adaptation. And so if your idea of reading is that you and the author have this solemn contract and you are the sole interpreter of that person's work, that an audiobook doesn't count because you're hearing someone else's interpretation.
I totally agree with that. And I'm trying to think of something that is an analogy for that. And for me, it's the difference between sheet music and a recording of a performance, because the sheet music is what the composer wrote, if you like. I mean, it's not always, because sometimes some third party has transcribed it into sheet music. But anyway, in principle, the sheet music is the work of the composer. But if you listen to a singer singing a song, whether it be live or a recording, you're listening to an interpretation. And we think of those as very different. Most people prefer to listen to somebody performing a song rather than reading the sheet music. But they are very different things. And I think the same is true of book and audiobook. It doesn't mean to say that one is better or worse than the other. They're just different things.
Yeah, I would agree. Do you have audiobooks?
I do. I don't have a huge number, but I do have some. But I do have lots of audio. I like, or used to like, I mean, I don't spend very much time listening to drama anymore, but I used to listen to audio drama, radio drama a lot. And I was involved in producing some back in the 90s. So it is something that for a long time was one of my obsessions. So I have quite a few full cast performances. I mean, I don't think of those as audiobooks because they're drama primarily. I'm less keen on a single reader reading a book, but I do have some of those. And when I have to read a book for a purpose, such as for research purposes, or I have to read it because I'm going into a book group session or something like that, I will often read while listening to an audiobook or interchange back and forwards between them. So I sort of treat them as being interchangeable for some purposes. I can read a book faster than an audiobook reader reads a book.
Do you listen to audiobooks at one speed, or do you listen to it sped up?
Usually sped up, unless I'm listening to it for very specifically for the performance. You know, it's Stephen Fry reading his book on Greek myth because I like the idea of Stephen Fry telling me about Greek myth.
I listen to things religiously only at 1x because I want that person's full interpretation of the book. I can only listen to auction talk for so long before it just all starts to run together, and I don't.
Yeah.
And the sound is I'm hearing the sound but not listening at that point.
Yes, I know what you mean.
Book question 9. Do you get autographs from authors? If so, what's the coolest autographed book you have?
One of the nice things about moving to Portland was Powell's Bookstore, because they regularly had author, and still do have author signing events. In 1998, David Brin came through as part of the Deadly Bees tour for their follow-on to the Robots and Empire series. It was Bryn, Benford, and Bear. And I went to Hal's Bookstore and I found a used first edition of his book, The Postman. And I had him autograph that for me.
And you still have that?
I do.
Very good. Have you got many others that are autographed?
I have quite a few others. I have almost a full set of Terry Brooks books from the Shaunera series that are autographed. I have one-offs from Orson Scott Card, Tad Williams, Brandon Sanderson, Martha Wells, Timothy Zahn. At one point, it was my goal to have like a science fiction library of hardcovers that were having as many autographs as you could.
I'm not a collector of autographs. I've got maybe half a dozen books with Bradbury's signature in them. But funnily enough, I never got anything autographed by him when I met him. But I've got a few books that I've either purchased and they've got a signature in, or that other people have procured the signature and sent it to me. The only other author I can think of where I actually went to the author with a book and they signed the book was Norman Spinrad. I've got a copy of Bugjack Baron, which has his signature in it. And I've got a couple of books with Harlan Ellison's signature in. So I'm not a big collector of author autographs. And as far as the coolest autograph book I own is probably one of the Bradbury books I've got, where he actually wrote my name and he wrote "Onward" and then signed it. And that was somebody else obtained that on my behalf and gifted it to me. So it was signed for me, but not in my presence.
In May of 1999, Terry Brooks' adaptation of The Phantom Menace by George Lucas, the Star Wars prequel book, came out, and he was chosen to do the novelization. And as part of his tour, he came through Powell's in Portland, and I had plans to go, but on the day that he was there, this other thing happened. My son Peter was born, and I had been going with a friend, Travis Illig, and Travis bought a book and had it autographed by Terry Brooks for me. And he wrote a little note about, to a young Jedi and his Jedi master, lots of magic or something like that. So that was really fun.
Book question 10. Do you collect individual books or sets or series or particular authors?
I tend to like collecting series and sets. So I have lots of John Scalzi, lots of Mary Robinette Cole. I used to collect Star Wars and Star Trek paperbacks and hardback books back in the day.
Interesting. I used to collect the Star Trek original series short story adaptations by James Blish. This is decades ago. I bought one of those and thought, these are not bad for adaptations. So I bought the second in the series and then the third. And as I was building up this series, they kept changing the look of them because they'd gone through different printings, I think there were 12, and I never had a uniform set that all looked the same. So that kind of that on the one hand that stoked my interest in building up a series, but on the other hand it put me off the idea, because if I don't buy the whole series in one go, it's never going to look uniform. And I found that with Ellison. I got most of my Ellison books are from the 80s, the 1980s, and they were published by Ace, and they all have these wonderful covers by Barclay Shaw. But not every Ellison book was published by Ace, so some Ellison books don't look the same as the Ace ones, and some were out of print by the time I tried to buy them, so I was only able to get later editions with different cover art. So again, there's that desire to have the uniformity of the set, but being frustrated in the ability. So I kind of just give up at that point. I know some people then turn that into their life's mission, to not only complete that set, but to have every set of that thing. But to me, I just find that frustrating, so I give up.
Yeah, I would love to have a matched hardback set of the Lloyd Alexander Chronicles of Prydain. But those books are now so old that to get the remaining book or two would be extremely expensive.
Right, yeah. I've just remembered something. Again, it's not science fiction at all, but when I was little, my parents bought me this science encyclopedia, and they must have bought it on some sort of instalment plan, because once a month a new volume of this encyclopedia would arrive. So first I got A is for Aardvark, and then the next month I would get the C is for Caterpillar and D is for I don't know. And these books came monthly, up to about 6 of them. And then all of a sudden, the rest of the alphabet arrived. And thinking back, my parents must have been buying this on some sort of instalment plan and then reached a point where they decided, oh, damn it, let's just get the rest of the set. But I don't know what happened to that encyclopedia set. It was really nice, a really beautifully illustrated colour science encyclopedia in about 20 volumes. And I don't have it. I don't remember getting rid of it. I wonder where it went.
Maybe it's like the famous American stories about, your parents threw out your comic book collection and now it's worth tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah. Do we have a quiz?
We do.
Ooh.
And conveniently, it happens to be related to books and libraries.
Ooh, that's good.
Are you ready?
I am very ready.
Okay, now, this is a call-in quiz. There have been errors in call-in quizzes in the past. If I've done something wrong, please tell us through social media so that I can give, Phil all the due props that he deserves for his hard work here. There are 6 questions, so this should go pretty quickly.
Okay.
I'm going to plumb the depth of your popular culture knowledge for this.
Okay.
In the librarian universe, so we're talking about movies and television series, highly educated librarians protect the world from the effects of magic users and artifacts. Name any actor who played the main role of librarian.
Oh my goodness. I am not familiar with this at all. So basically, what this question boils down to is name an actor. I'm going to guess Jonathan Pryce.
No.
No.
Let me give you a hint. The very first actor to have the role of librarian in the Librarians movie also played Santa Claus in a comedy.
So now it boils down to who has played Santa Claus in a comedy. Oh, I'm struggling. I'm going to have to pass unless you can give me another clue.
I'll give you a clue for so there are 4 different actors that have done this. One of the actors had a major role in a Dune movie within the last 40 years.
Within the last 40 years. So we're talking about one of those previous Dune movies. So I'm going to guess Kyle MacLachlan.
Exactly.
Phew.
Let me tell you the other actors. Bob Newhart, who played Santa Claus in Elf.
Oh, yeah. I thought of Elf, but all I could think of was the elf. I couldn't think of who played Santa Claus.
Noah Wiley from ER.
Yes.
And think about this, from Leverage Redemption, rather.
Okay, yeah.
And then John Larroquette.
Oh, I had no idea.
Okay, question 2.
Okay.
The Star Trek episode All Our Yesterdays features a librarian. What is the librarian's name and what is his function?
Now, this is my territory. His name is Mr. Atos, or Atos, and he maintains the machinery that allows people to go back in time.
That is exactly right.
And of course, Atos is A to Z.
Oh, it is.
Oh, had you not realised?
I hadn't. Okay, back to pop culture. Noted trainer of female vampire fighters is a librarian at Sunnyvale High School in California in the 1990 series based on the movie of the same name. What is the name of the series?
I'm guessing that this must be Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Exactly.
Phew.
And we're talking about Giles, played by Anthony Head, I believe?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Now, I've already asked you 3 questions, and I know that a couple of our listeners are librarians.
Yeah.
And they're dying to know why I haven't asked you a question about a planet-sized library that's created in order to save knowledge as the galactic empire fades into obscurity. Who is the original author of this series of books? And for a bonus, which famous sci-fi pulp magazine originally carried the short stories that comprise the first book in the series?
I think we are talking about the Foundation series. And that first appeared, I believe, in Astounding.
That is correct. And the author?
Isaac Asimov.
Exactly. All right. Next question. This author is known for writing fantasy of truly epic scope, but he also writes young adult books, such as the 6-book series Alcatraz and the Evil Librarians. What's his name?
I assume this author is still alive.
Yes,
And I think you said he.
I did. One of my favorite authors, if that helps.
Oh, well, is it... it's not Brandon Sanderson.
It is, yes.
Okay.
Okay, last question.
Okay.
Jocasta Nu was the chief librarian of the archives during the last years of the Galactic Republic. What large science fiction property is she a part of?
And the name again was?
Jocasta Nu.
Is that spelled N-E-W?
N-U.
N-U. Jocasta Nu. I think I need a clue.
She was the chief librarian of the Jedi archives during the last years of the Galactic Republic.
Well, it's some Star Wars thing then.
Yes, yeah. She's part of Star Wars.
Oh, okay. I don't need to be more specific.
No.
If I took part in any kind of Star Wars quiz, that would be my answer to every question. It's some Star Wars thing.
Yeah, well done.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, well, for a call-in quiz. I didn't ask you how many Spocks there were, and none of them have ever been librarians.
shall we do some past, present and future?
Yeah.
So I've got a past item, and actually I discovered this in the public library today, because I saw on the spine of the book, First Contact. I thought, oh, science fiction. But this was under history, under the heading of history. And it's a book by David Olusoga, British historian. And it's a book, it's about the so-called Age of Discovery. So, the time of Columbus and all of those world explorers. But it looks, at least part of the book, looks at the idea of civilizations coming into contact with each other. Because, of course, it wasn't that Columbus discovered America. It was that one culture encountered another culture. And it just reminded me that the concept of first contact, which we love in science fiction, is something that's happened time and again in the history of our species. And yet we tend not to think about it. I've read about the first couple of chapters and quite liked it. So First Contact by David Olusoga, published in 2018.
One of my favorite science fiction books is based on the concept of first contact. It's by Alan Dean Foster, called Nor Crystal Tears.
Right, yeah.
My past item is the movie Stargate was released 30 years ago, October 28th.
Oh my goodness.
It's hard to believe.
And how many sequels and spin-offs did it spawn?
That's a tricky question, because some of them were worked on but never fully released, like the Stargate cartoon series. I don't know very much about it other than the fact that it exists. So there was the original series, Stargate SG-1, and then there was Stargate Atlantis, and then there was Stargate Universe. There's been a role-playing game released where you can, make your own journeys through the wormhole.
Yeah. I feel old.
I saw that in the theaters.
Did you?
Yeah, it was delightful.
I've got a present item here. I mentioned this earlier, and I mentioned it last episode as well. I recently guested on the podcast called Every Single Sci-Fi Film Ever, and I was talking about Ray Bradbury's contribution to It Came From Outer Space, the 1953 movie. So that's out there. I don't like plugging other podcasts. I think we should plug our own. But it was good fun to be on. It's a podcast which takes a slightly academic look at things, in the sense that most of the guests on it are academics of some kind. But it does have a policy of not talking too academic. So when you're participating, you're asked not to sort of give footnotes and scholarly references. So it keeps the conversation quite light, but it's good fun. It's a very good series, and I'm enjoying it even when I'm not in it.
Oh, even when you're not in it. I'll have to give that episode a listen. Kind of a sad one. Terry Garr passed away on October 29th.
Yes.
So yeah, she did a number of science fiction movies. She was in Star Trek, Gary 7. She was in Close Encounters with the Third Kind.
Yeah.
She was in Witch's Brew, which is an adaptation of Fritz Lieber's book, Conjure Wife.
Yes, very sad. I have to say, one of those actors who, in my mind, is perpetually young, because I know her from a limited range of films in which she is of a similar age. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to learn that somebody has died and how old they are now, or how old they were, can be a surprise sometimes. But yeah, it's very sad. I've got another present item, which is The Last Dangerous Visions has finally been published. This is the long-awaited anthology from Harlan Ellison, who published Dangerous Visions in 1967 and again Dangerous Visions in about 71 or 72 or something like that. And he announced The Last Dangerous Visions would be published in 1974, but it didn't come out. And then forever after, he would say, oh, it's coming. And he never did publish it. And it's finally been published after his death. J. Michael Straczynski of Babylon 5 fame became the executor of the Ellison estate, and one of his personal missions was to get Last Dangerous Visions published. So he's published it, It's not necessarily the anthology that Ellison would have published, but we don't know what it would have been like if Ellison had published it, because Ellison had to give some of the stories back to the original authors. He was always buying new stories, so there was no fixed table of contents. Nobody knows really what The Last Dangerous Visions would have been. All we've got is what J. Michael Straczynski has been able to put together, and that's just been published. And I've got an ebook version of it. I've just read the preface and the afterword, and now I've got all the stories to read.
Cool. I've been reading recently the book How to Kill an Asteroid, The Real Science of Planetary Defense by Robin George Andrews. Yeah, it's science. It's not science fiction. But it reminded me so much of the Hugo Award-winning book We Built a City on Mars from last year that when I saw that name coming through the library book feed, I'm like, oh, I have to read that. It's mainly about the double asteroid redirection test, DART, because this author followed it, not from exactly its inception, but as they went through development and launch. In fact, we just launched. And so now we're talking with the people that are doing the monitoring, what their hopes are, and how they became planetary defense scientists. And it's very interesting.
I've got a future item. I was just sitting today and I thought, I wonder what science fiction films are coming out next year. So I just Googled science fiction films to be released in 2025, and I was very disappointed to see, although there are some interesting things coming out next year, nearly everything is based on a pre-existing property. So there's a film called Superman. Perhaps you've heard of that before. There's 28 Years Later, which I would be keen to see, but of course it's a sequel to two other films. There's a Jurassic World film coming out next year. There's another Avatar. This is new in the sense that I don't think there's been a film of this before. Thunderbolts from Marvel, but of course that's based on pre-existing characters. The Star Trek Section 31 film is coming out next year. I'll be interested to see that, but again, it's based on Star Trek. There's a Captain America film. There's a Predator film. Just about the only thing that looks new, but it's based on a book, is a film called Mickey 17, which is based on a book called Mickey 7. So for some reason, they've added 10 to Mickey. I have no idea what that's about. Yeah, it's just so sad that there's so very little original material. Apart from that one, there's and that's based on a book, so even that's not totally original. The only film I could see in this first list of 12 that came up when I Googled is a Pixar movie called Elio, which, as far as I can tell, is original. Everything else is based on something else that exists.
The last original science fiction movie that I can think of off the top of my head was The Creator.
Yeah.
And then there's one coming out next month called Elevation.
Okay. Don't know that one.
It's kind of like A Quiet Place. It has its own, MacGuffin. You have to be above a certain elevation to stay safe. To save somebody's life, they need to go back down below the danger line to get some kind of medication to save a child.
That's Speed, isn't it? But using a different physical parameter.
Yes.
I've got another future item. I saw an article the other day. I think it might have been in The Guardian, but I'll find it out and I'll put a link on our website. But I saw an article which was about the future of publishing, and it was basically saying that publishers are trying to be more green, and so in future we can expect books to be slimmer, to be printed on lighter paper, and to have smaller margins so that they can have fewer pages. All of which I applaud, and probably smaller print as well. But as I picked up this 1980 paperback, which I've still got in my hand, and you can hear the pages turning now, I'm reminded that back in the 80s, print was quite small, and the spacing between the lines of text in a paperback was quite small. And if you compare a 1980 paperback with a 2020 paperback, you'll find modern books are somehow, they're almost like large print. I mean, they're not huge print, but they use a bigger font, they use bigger spacing. They waste a lot of paper. And I think it's because they think people will assume a book is more substantial. This paperback I've got here, this is Fahrenheit 451, 1980 edition, and it's got 158 pages. If I pick up a 2020 edition of this, it's going to have about 300 pages. And yet it's the same book. So books have grown, and in order to save money and also to up their green credentials, but I'm sure it's about money ultimately, they're moving back to smaller paperbacks.
Yeah, I can remember when hardback books were $20, and then when they were $25, and now they're routinely above that, and that's a hard thing to buy at that cost.
And yet authors don't make very much money, so it's really sad. Most of what you pay goes to the industrial machinery of publishing rather than to the authors. But I do like picking up these old 80s paperbacks and seeing the prices. Those were the days. We're turning into old men, Colin, or I am anyway.
Well, when you mentioned larger font, I was afraid that the reading population was growing older all the time, and so they kept, accommodating us.
Yeah, it doesn't work for me. I need the e-book. I so have to enlarge everything. I've been wearing glasses since the age of 7, so I've always been short-sighted. But then in the last 10 years or so, I've not only been short-sighted, I've started becoming simultaneously long-sighted because of age. That's when you feel old.
Wow.
Well, I think we're done.
I agree.
Good. So thanks for listening, everyone. We're Phil Nichols and Colin Cuskey. Our theme music is from Purple Planet. And don't forget, you can find us on all the usual podcast platforms, including YouTube, but in audio only. Please like, share, subscribe, all that stuff, and leave us a positive review somewhere. And hopefully we'll see you next time.